I'm going to go and stand in the park for my personal truth and my freedom. If you want to stand for your personal truth and your freedom, I'll be in the park. We'll stand together. I was arrested for organising the protests and for doing these videos and for a stand in the park. It was pretty scary. I mean, I didn't know, I was in jail. I didn't know when I'd get out. I didn't know how far they were going to take this. I was all through every paper in Australia. So I was public enemy number one. I was getting death threats every day. It was just nuts. I'd do it all again.
I recently discovered that over half the people who regularly listen to this show still haven't hit subscribe. So let me ask you this. If you're looking for conversations that challenge your thinking, help you to rise above the noise, and give you the tools to live more freely, then please hit that subscribe button. We're on a mission to reach over 50,000 subscribers so we can get these bold, uncensored conversations in front of the people who need them most. And here's my commitment to you. Every single week, I'll show up with the most courageous guests, the deepest insights, and the truth that most people are too afraid to say out loud. This is more than a podcast, it's a movement. So if you're with us, subscribe now and let's build something that truly matters. We've just launched The Thinking Society, a 6-week online course designed to upgrade your critical thinking, strengthen your mental sovereignty, and give you the tools to break down those manipulative narratives. It kicks off Thursday, the 22nd of May. Head to weareelevate.org/thinking society to find out more and secure your spot. Now buckle up and let's get into it.
I'm with Brady Gunn today, one of the most unsung heroes of the COVID resistance, the man behind A Stand in the Park, which was a lifeline to many of us across the world. And as I was prepping for today's interview, there's so much what I want to explore because it was a fascinating time in history, but I just became flooded with gratitude for you, Brady, because if you hadn't had the courage to do what you did at that moment, none of us would have had that lifeline, that solace, that opportunity to connect every Sunday in the park at a time where we're being isolated, disconnected, at a time when the world had gone insane. So I'm honored to be with you today. I'm so grateful for what you've helped to catalyze across the world. I'm looking forward to telling the story as part of our discussion today.
G'day. Right back at you. Thanks for doing what you've done as well. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you.
Appreciate it. I haven't stopped. Now, you Aussies were absolute heroes to many of us across the world who were appalled by the COVID measures. What we saw from the UK in Australia were unbelievable. We were seeing grandmothers being pepper sprayed, peaceful protesters being hounded and hunted down. For you, Brady, looking back, what are the moments from that time that still haunt you today?
Oh, it was so surreal. It was like a trapdoor fell out of the world one Tuesday afternoon at 3:34 and 20 seconds or something, and the whole world went into free fall. Everyone we knew changed, the whole world changed, the fabric of reality changed, and we were trying to figure out how to live in this new world where everyone was nuts, and the police had gone nuts, and there was and lies were truth, and it was so ridiculously fast and so ridiculously huge that we sort of went into the stratosphere times 10 so quickly that you couldn't get your bearings. You were almost sort of clinging at air to just try and figure out what is going on here. And so it was kind of everything. But I think the first time when I really felt that in the flesh was the beginning of the birth of A Stand in the Park, I should say. It was the first rally in Sydney against COVID, which was in August 2020. And I don't think I'd ever been to a protest before, certainly nothing like that I was sort of passionate about. And it was pretty heady sort of times. I mean, we were all sort of fairly, I went there with a fair bit of trepidation. We really couldn't make heads or tails of what was going on down there. And there must have been 200 or 300 people down there. And you could have played Benny Hill music to that protest and sped it up, and it was a comedy. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was those knuckle-dragging, overall-wearing riot cops everywhere. There was probably 200 or 300 of us, probably 200 of them, and someone would bang a bongo and they'd get dragged off, and someone would hold a megaphone and start to say something. They'd get dragged off. I remember one of the politicians here, Michael O'Neill, who's Barbara O'Neill's husband, was there, and he's got a sort of a childish little sort of grin on disposition anyway, but he was running around being chased by one of these big ooga booga policemen through the crowd and stuff with that little grin of his. It was, and then at the end of that protest, we ended up marching around in circles. It was an oval, and someone had the idea, because they were trying to move us all on, just to walk around in circles. So we were walking around in circles on an oval with the riot police behind us, And if you had to sped it up, I just remember standing in the middle of it thinking, what planet am I on? Not what country am I in? And that was confronting, because you sort of maybe are used to seeing riot police in riots in South America or wherever, but I'd never seen that before, let alone in such a ridiculous situation, in the face of such lies, in the face of we weren't even doing anything. I remember just standing in the middle of it going, wow, we got a problem here. And so that was the first time I thought I'd been hit in the face with a shovel. The first of many, but most of it was online up until that stage. Because we'd slingshotted so heavily and so quickly, we were just trying to sort of figure out what was going on for 4 or 5 months, and we still are. I mean, the cards are only still landing now. We didn't realise that such evil existed and that such plans were in play. They've had a mega head start. But that was the first time, and that was the birth of Stand in the Park right there. I went away from that and started to Stand in the Park a week later.
So how did the carnage that unfold that you witnessed, you just described, almost comedic carnage, lead to something very different in the Stand in the Park? What was the inspiration?
Well, I went away from that thinking, what a wasted resource. I mean, there was only 200 or 300 people there, but it was all we had. And how everyone had just sort of dispersed and went home. We hadn't shared any information. We hadn't shared any numbers. We hadn't been a support for each other. We hadn't come up with a plan. We hadn't arranged to meet again. I mean, nothing sort of came out of that in that sense. And so I went away thinking that there was there was something missing, or we could add something. And it sort of just came to me in one fell swoop. I thought there was a couple of problems here that we need to solve. One of them is that they threw all of their resources, that one big protest. So if we did more of a stand rather than a big protest, where they could focus their resources, and there was an organizer, and the organizer could be targeted, and that a lot of people were scared to go to, and then we couldn't really, it wasn't just the dynamic to share information or numbers or come up with a plan. It was more of a stand, and so it was going to be local. It would be every Sunday from 10 to 11, so we'd know where to find each other. There'd be no leaders because there was no agenda, but there'd be no leaders so no one could get arrested. There was no agenda, so there was no division, so no religion, no leaders. We'd wear yellow in unity. If the internet went down, we knew where to find each other. We'd get offline because we needed physical energy exchanges, because it's a really important thing is having physical energy exchanges, and online's just not enough. And we could be a support for each other. We needed to make friends. It just sort of came to me in one fell swoop from what I can remember. And I still had a fair bit of trepidation about it. I remember going in fairly ginger to that first rally. I was sort of scared going in there, and that didn't go away afterwards. We really didn't know how far this was going to go, but then it just did itself from there. It just happened. I just announced it and went and stood in the park, and no one came.
Yeah, so you had this grand vision, this idea of how it's, a bit revolutionary moment, and there you were, one man in a park. Yeah, so, and is it correct that it took 3 months really for anyone to join you in particular?
Yeah. Nearly 3 months. I've stood in there every Sunday, 10 to 11 a.m. in Sydney Hyde Park, Australia. I was announcing it online. There was sort of a lot of freedom groups on Facebook, particularly. It sprouted up at that stage. So we were connected online by that stage. And so I was sharing it everywhere. I said, I've come up with this idea. This is what it is. No leaders, no agenda. We were yellow in unity. So I listed everything that I just said. And people were seeing it, but they just didn't see the vision. And so I went down there the first week. Nobody came. Went down there the second week. Nobody came. Third week, nobody came. Fourth week, drove all the way in there, stood there in my yellow shirt. Nobody came. Fifth week, sixth week, seventh week, nearly 3 months. I stood there every week from 10 to 11 a.m., make sure I didn't leave early. And nobody came. And there was videos that you can see that it's all on video. You can see the whole thing, but there was videos of me saying, we're standing here for freedom. We're standing here for the elderly. We're standing here. There's nobody there. I just didn't look like the dickhead in the park by himself. But then 2 people came down, and there was Russ and Damo came down. They said the look on your face was priceless. I'd been standing there by myself for so long, and 2 people came up and said, are you standing in the park? And I looked at them like a little kid who just made friends at kindy. Oh, are you here for Stand in the Park? Oh, will you be my friend? And then another guy came down, and then it sort of exploded from there. There was sort of 10, and then there was 50, and then it was in Canada. Then there was 30 or 40 in New Zealand, and then Fifi. One of my old friends, who's the founder of UK Stand in the Park, came along, and it just exploded over there. it really just went nuts. And it sort of went to about 1,500 stand in the parks in 40 countries within a few months of that, really, not long after.
Resonating with this conversation, then you already know how important it is to take back control of your mind in a world that's constantly trying to hijack it. That's exactly why we created the Thinking Society, a 6-week course to help you sharpen your critical thinking, to break down narratives and strengthen your mental sovereignty. We kick off live on Thursday, the 22nd of May, and places are limited. So join us now at weareelevate.org/Thinking Society.
Crazy. Oh, I mean, so many people would have given up. And, you can take the parallels in anything, whether you're starting a new project, a business, or a creative idea. And, if it doesn't quite work out as you envisioned in the first few days or months, many people would have given up. What kept you going every single week?
Well, intuition. I spend a lot of time and effort and tears learning how to not think so much. And this is one of the books that I've written, is The Art of Shush, about how I learned how to not think so much, because I went through a big depression and was a very, very, very unhappy child and teenager and adult. And it really wasn't working for me. So I trained myself to not think. And when I wasn't thinking so much and putting the labels on everything, then my old pain came out. And once the old pain had moved, then I live in my intuition now. And so at the time I was sort of saying, I didn't stand in the park. My truth stood in that park. And I think a lot of people sort of perceive that to be, the truth against the government. We know what's going on and we stand for the truth. But if you change that for intuition, I was stood in that park. I've spent so much time sort of finding my intuition that I wasn't making my own decisions at that stage. I was just moved to stand there. And so standing there every month for 3 months was just sort of me standing there waiting for another feeling to come, to go home, or somebody was coming, or it was none of my business. And so that's why.
Yeah. And then when people did finally join you, I mean, that must have been, you kind of joked about it as like, can we be friends? But it must have been a moment of ecstasy, in this moment of just relief and joy that, the vision was starting to unfold in ways that perhaps you'd previously seen to be possible.
Yeah, I guess so. I think there was sort of, I was sort of impartial to that almost, as well, as sort of as cold as that sounds, but it was just whether I expected that to happen or whether or not, it was just part of it, and then it was just growing, and I was just almost watching it happen. And I don't really sort of take credit for it. I take absolute 100% credit for doing the work to step into my intuition. That's the hardest thing anybody will ever do. I'm convinced of it. But once you do that, my intuition stood in that park, so I don't take any credit for it. And we are doing all of this together. Anybody who's ever stood in a park ever since is also just as important as I am, and just as brave. A lot of people sort of really were very courageous to go and stand in those parks for a variety of reasons. But I don't get sort of as many anymore, but some of the messages that I used to get sent were so powerful. A stand in the park has saved so many lives and made such a difference in others that if you had the budget to make a documentary, it would be great. But it's so widespread and so intricate and in depth that it would be hard to capture. But I used to get messages saying, "Oh, I lost my husband, I lost my kids, I lost my job, I lost my house, I lost my money, I was living in my car, I was just about to kill myself, and I'm crying as I'm writing this, but I went to stand in the park, and now I found the most lovely people I've ever met. We go bushwalking on Wednesdays, we go standing on Sundays. I totally feel like I found my life's better than it's ever been." Really, really powerful stuff. Used to make me cry all the time. Couldn't be any more powerful messages. And what a brilliant thing on that subject. What a brilliant thing that COVID's done to really crystallize us and each other and what's important to us, and outline what was going on in the world, and drive us back towards what's important to us, and nature and each other and the correct health. And it's a brilliant thing. This is a brilliant 5 years. It's a brilliant, brilliant thing what's just happened.
Yeah, well, it's totally transformed my life, put me on a totally different path. And I'd really like to talk about how it's changed your life a little bit later on. But one of the things that I think was so powerful is that, and you illustrated the juxtaposition really of what you first saw in the protest movement, because often protests are loud, risky, confrontational, but stand in a park allow people to show up as effectively as conscientious objectors. They didn't have to say a word, they didn't have to come with placards. Was that your intention, that, people can just show up, and is that an important piece of the growth of the stands?
Yeah, absolutely. It was never designed to do anything at all other than people get great minds together and be a support for each other. It was never a protest. It was never meant to be a visual protest. It never stood for anything. I used to say it's like the Seinfeld of protest. It's the protest about nothing. Or there used to be the aero bars. It's the bubbles of nothing that make it really something. It's like that bubbly chocolate, and that's what Stand in the Park was. I never leveraged it. Some people used to say you probably should, and I'm like, no, it's a safe space down there. It doesn't. As soon as you stand for something, you stand against something else. A Stand in the Park doesn't belong to me anyway. It belongs to freedom. It belongs to the park. So it's not my decision, but it was designed to do nothing so that things could sprout from that. And people used to say, we've started this initiative. Can we use a Stand in the Park, or do you want any credit for it? I'm like, no, you name it, you go for it. It's yours. A Stand in the Park was designed to start initiatives, form relationships, to grow off. It never wanted any credit for it, and it never created them directly. It just put people together that needed to be together.
Wow. I mean, it's so fascinating from. Oh, absolutely. I mean, from one man in a park to a global movement. I mean, it should have a documentary. I mean, it's not only just to document that time, and I would love this like photo amnesty, video amnesty of all the different stories in the parks. Imagine all the stories and the photos and the smiles and the joy. If you collected it from all across the world, it'd be beautiful. You could do like a Tate Modern gallery, just walking around seeing everyone's photos and the experiences. And please do, as you're watching this, send us your photos for Stand in the Park. I'd love to see them in the comments. But how did it evolve from just you in the field? Obviously, you mentioned that people showed up, but intentionally it was a leaderless movement. And in the UK, when this was happening, I was studying like the history of activism, and I was reading about strategy and organization and all of these different things. And it's very, in a way, when I've witnessed the movements that evolved here, there's a lot of control to it. There's a lot of detailed planning, and yours was emergent. It was organic. How did like the seeds spread? It almost feels like nature. Seeing one of those like little I don't know what the little plants are called, but the wind blows and all the little seeds blow away, and it's like someone went and stood in a different park, and all of a sudden there's a new location. How did it go from you and a couple of others in one park to the next park? What was the next park? How did it grow?
Well, I think a lot of people, we didn't know what to do for a start. Nobody knew what to do in this new world that we'd found ourselves in, that we were trying to live in. None of us had a plan really, and so the simplicity of Stand in the Park is served it there. Is that we don't know what to do, but we'll go and stand in a park and we'll wear a yellow shirt because at least that's something. And then I think once people sort of saw what it did do and formed those relationships, so many people. I mean, my best friends in the world now are from a Stand in the Park, and hundreds of thousands of people could say the same thing. And so it really worked, and I think that was contagious, both online from the photos or whatever that we were seeing, plus the word spreading or whatever. I think the simplicity of Stand in the Park is what made it work. It's so simple that it's unassuming, and I think so. It was a safe space. It was in a park, so it was quite welcoming. There was no leaders and no agenda, and so if anyone was going to go anywhere, then it was sort of to a Stand in the Park, and nobody knew what to do at that stage. Nobody really knew any. I mean, I didn't know what else to do except go and stand in the park in a yellow T-shirt with a silly smiley on it. We really were sort of caught off guard by what happened, and then I think once word spread that the people had made so many friends, and that this is what's going on, and here is something that you can do. You can move your body, and you can stand for something and draw your line in the sand energetically. And there was something special going on down there. This frequency of freedom is a real sort of thing. Where people were going down there and having conversations with people that you would never have spoken to otherwise, or even met before, and talking to them like you'd known them for 20 years, and really having a really positive energy exchange where it was really fulfilling. And you'd walk away from a Stand in the Park 5 hours later having had the best conversations with 20 people that you'd ever had before. You're an inch taller. It was a real thing. There's a real sort of frequency of this freedom stuff, and that's worth sort of acknowledging that, because it was tangible down at Stand in the Park, and that's what it was. And at the same time too, I was doing a lot of videos online that were really sort of resonating with a lot of people. I've never spent any money on sort of marketing a Stand in the Park. It cost me quite a lot of money to run, but I'd never promoted it through ads or anything. But I never set out to do any videos online. I just sort of, again, I just had to. There was words that needed to come out of my mouth, and so I opened my mouth and let them come out, and that was really resonating with a lot of people. And so I think people were sort of associating me with Stand in the Park and what I was saying, and resonating with what I was saying, and sort of thinking, yeah, I want to be a part of this Stand in the Park thing. But it just worked. It still does. That's why it grew so organically. It works.
How important is it for it to be leaderless? Because that in itself is a kind of point of difference, but with so many advantages. In a time where the operation of the machine was trying to shut down protests, it made it very difficult for them to target any individual leader, which is a really strong benefit. But for you, philosophically, you didn't want it to be about anything specific, and you didn't want anyone to take leadership roles. How did you ensure that happened? And did you grapple with people that were trying to wrestle control out of it? But how did that unfold?
No, I never grappled with people, but a lot of people tried to control most of them, because that's where people were. A lot of people were coming down with their solutions and their religion and their common law stuff and their political parties, and which was natural. But the community has to learn how to police itself. We have to take 100% personal responsibility here, and without leadership in that, and we're all leaders, whether it's running for president or making sandwiches for the president. They're both leadership roles, and people sort of get confused between being a leader and showing leadership. They can be very different things, and people need to sort of qualify what that is for themselves. And so the future is linear. We have to go forwards as responsible citizens anyway, and the community has to learn how to police itself, which was really sort of taken away from us. Back in the tribal days, you had to get along. There was 100 people in that village. You had no choice but to just get along. And so you might see Barry coming down the street and like, oh, here comes Barry. I bloody hate Barry. But you couldn't escape. Whereas now we can escape Barry quite easily, and then we can go and compartmentalize ourselves online by hanging around with people who just think what we think and back up what we say. And so not only have we sort of lost our whatever the word is, techniques of sort of, I forget the word, but battle or debate techniques, we've really lost those, but we've also lost the ability to get along with people and like people that we sort of dislike, because we don't have to anymore. And so in a Stand in the Park, having no leaders meant that nobody could be targeted, but nobody could be in charge anyway, which gave everybody a chance to flourish. So there was a two-pronged sort of decision. One was quite spiritual and one was quite practical.
Wow. And I love what you said there. Everyone brings their own leadership, and that in which way it makes it kind of leaderful as opposed to leaderless. It's people standing in their power, standing.
Yeah.
In accordance with what they were standing with. But you contacted Fifi in the UK, and the message spread, and she's become a dear friend, and watching what she's achieved over here to spread the message and inspire others to take a stand has been beautiful to see. It really took off here in the UK. I've been to many different stands. Were you at all surprised by the way it was taken up in the UK?
I was just, yeah, it's sort of, it's to keep stepping back from fear of sounding sort of too spiritual or too cold in it, that I was just sort of watching it happen. I really sort of didn't have any ownership over it. I still don't really take credit over starting it, and I don't take credit over a lot of the magnificent things that I've done in my life since the intuition sort of kicked in. All the stuff that I got wrong either, because when you're not sort of running the show from your head and with an agenda, I'm literally just sort of bumbling through my life moment by moment. And so I was just watching what was unfolding. And so it wasn't like a roller coaster for me. That wasn't a huge emotional trip at all. But to see, to get those stories was the real feeling that I got. And so impressive, just how quickly it grew and how much good it did. And it's so good to watch. So good to watch.
Yeah, I mean, we're quite lucky in 2020 with the stands, because for once in Britain we had a bit of sunshine, so there was an incentive there to actually get outside alongside the so yeah, the nature worked in our favour, and it's right now in springtime here. The sun is shining, and I'm reminiscing a lot about those times. But the stands are still going in different parts of the world, maybe not at the same scale that they were during the height of kind of the in-your-face tyranny that we're dealing with during COVID. in your view, what do you think therefore has been like this staying power? Because a lot of the freedom movement, the quote unquote freedom movement, in many ways has fizzled out or become tribalized. What's given the staying power to a stand in the park, do you think?
Well, I think the simplicity of it and the accessibility of it, but also a lot of us, there's sort of a resurgence at the moment. It's done a couple of wanes, but it has a resurgence at the moment because I think what we're realizing now is that COVID was the Trojan horse and the platform. I mean, back in 2020, we were standing in the park. We didn't see anywhere near the chemtrails that we're seeing now. We didn't see a lot of the woke stuff. We didn't see a lot of the ridiculous media stuff. It wasn't quite as out of control. The immigration hadn't ramped up quite like they've ramped it up. So it really was, it's like they shook the bag and tumble dried everybody, tipped everybody upside down and pin-yarded them and battered the sense out of them and injected them with stuff and then used that sort of nonsensical place that they put anyone in that was so foreign to really bring in a lot of this stuff. And so there's still I always made sure that since the very beginning that a stand in the park was standing for truth and for freedom. We were never standing against COVID and against the government, against these rat bags and we never gave our power away to that. We were always standing for truth and for freedom, even though it was quite obvious that we were standing in the face of mandates and lockdowns and all of that nasty stuff. And there's still so much to stand against now. There's still so much truth and freedom. There's more truth and freedom to stand for now. And there's just as much or more to stand against. I mean, cost of living's gone up while companies make mega profits. Government's making decisions without consulting us. Tax money going to the Ukraine. Like, there's just so many ridiculous things that aren't okay. That we need to stand against if we were going to. That people are still fueled up, or again fueled up, to go and stand in that park like that sort of outragey feeling that we had in COVID, just minus a couple of notches, but. It's still just as current or more than ever. And there's more people who would stand for those reasons. More people have woken up and more people have joined together, which is really sort of beautiful thing to watch. The farmers are now standing next to the anti-vaxxers that we were, and then we're all standing next to the sort of anti-woke stuff. People who never talked to each other before in their lives are now totally linked, having an absolutely connected and pointing their fingers at exactly the same people on the same platform. They poked a tiger here. They are losing this massively, these guys, massively.
Well, I think that's one of the beautiful things about standing for truth and freedom, because rather than, putting a flag down saying this is all the things that we stand against, it creates the things that you would stand against are in direct opposition to freedom and truth. So therefore, it becomes an attractive place to gather, even though I think for a lot of people during the height of Stand in the UK, the COVID measures were a catalyst. That was their point of kind of ignition. But the ones that are still standing, they're standing persistently for the principles of truth and freedom. But how have you witnessed the stands evolving? Do you think that people are now showing up to continue to stand for those things, or are they coming to stand against the new wave of impositions? What's your perception of what others are doing within this movement?
No idea. And it's none of my business. I have no idea. Everybody's different. Every stand's different. It's 30 countries. So me sitting here in Byron Bay, Australia, I've got nothing to do with Bangkok, Thailand, or Romania, or wherever all of these stands are starting, or Liverpool, England, or all of these legends are standing for their own truth and their own freedom. And I always said that in the beginning too. Before I started to stand in the park, I made it very clear that we've all got different personal truths. We've got different pasts, different histories, different beliefs, different morals, different religions. That is a truth. My truth is actually different to their truth. And I'm going to go and stand in the park for my truth, my personal truth. I always made sure it was called personal truth when I was talking about that. I'm going to go and stand in the park for my personal truth and my freedom. If you want to stand for your personal truth and your freedom, I'll be in the park. We'll stand together. It was totally linear from the start. And they do vary, and so everybody's got a different version of what's going on at all stages ever, and the world now, and different versions of reality, let alone the personal truths, and so they stand for whatever they need to stand for, and so do I, and also the point was that even if we completely disagree in our personal truths and freedoms, who cares? If you're standing for my ability to disagree with you, then we're brothers and sisters. Even if we completely disagree with each other, I don't care. That's what we're fighting for, is truth and freedom. We're not meant to agree.
If you're ready to take back control of your mind, then join us inside the Thinking Society, a 6-week course to sharpen your thinking, cut through the narratives, and build real mental sovereignty. We start on Thursday, the 22nd of May. Grab your spot now at weareelevate.org/Thinking Society.
Was it at all difficult for you to set something in motion like this and then completely let go? I mean, that you talked about the spiritual side and the intuition. I mean, there are so many people, including myself, who have started projects, and you know, it's like nurturing a child. You want to raise it and give it your energy and attention. But how is this different? Did you ever have any resistance to letting go? Was there any kind of inclination to want to kind of shape and mold it in a certain way? How were you able to do that? I'm really curious.
It was never started with any agenda. It literally says it on the fly. I think there's no agenda. I didn't have an agenda either. I had no expectation of it. I hadn't speculated on what it would do. I really wasn't that far ahead of myself at all. I was just had a feeling to go and stand in the park and do this yellow thing. And so I was, and I live my life like that. I just literally just bumble forward and tumble forward into space and just watch what happens. And sometimes it's really cool and sometimes it's not, but I don't think a huge amount. I just sort of live in that intuition. And so, no, I think the harder part might have been to see how it could have been leveraged. It really, in the short term, it really could have done a whole lot of good by putting its logo or whatever, or me personally endorsing things, or getting a crowbar in and moving it that way and standing for stuff and aligning with other initiatives and stuff like that. And in the short term, that could have been really tempting. And a lot of people they did have a go at me saying, why don't you should be using this for far more good than you are. So maybe that was tempting, but otherwise it was quite a pleasure to just watch it organically grow and people take ownership of it, and just watch the smiley faces in the parks standing for truth and freedom. It was a true joy that I wasn't a part of it or wasn't trying to steer it. But I also should say that that I really had to qualify that I'm the inadvertent spokesperson of a stand in the park. My face is all over it. I did start it. I'm not the leader of it, but I have been intricate to it. And I probably did need to sort of reconcile that to what that meant to me and to stand in the park. So it took a little bit of qualifying, but no, it was just a joy to watch the child play in the forest.
Amazing. It's a book I'm trying to remember. It's like the Surrender Experiment or the Surrender Effect. You know that one? Have you heard that? What's his name? Oh, I've just completely forgot. There's an author that's written this incredible book about just surrendering to the flow of the universe and, following his intuition and, not letting his thinking mind kind of try and control the direction of his life, but really going with what shows up. And as you're describing your own approach to this, it just feels like it's very similar to the kind of distinctions he's made in this life. And I'd have to recall, for some reason, got a mental blank. It's something like the Surrender Effect or Surrender Experiment. I'll look it up, but put it in the chat as you're watching this if you forgot at all. So even with that though, taking a step back, you must, as a focal point, as someone who was seen as someone who was a catalyst for this, did you see the parks evolve in ways that even surprised you? Was there some just moments where the kind of laugh out loud moments, or just kind of like barefaced, what on earth is going on there? What sort of perceptions have you had of some of the things that you've witnessed?
Oh, there was loads of them. I mean, one thing that came to mind as you were saying that was that we were only allowed to exercise in twos here. I don't know if they did the same thing, but you're only allowed to exercise in twos in the park. And so people were going down to stand in the park and pairing up. And to show that they were exercising, they were taking skis and boogie boards and stuff and walking around in twos with skis and boogie boards in the park. The police, I'm exercising. I got my snow skis in the middle of summer in Australia. And so many initiatives that started was the real joy to see. A lot of the initiatives in Australia and even England as well, sort of a lot of them lead back to a stand in the park. That's where a lot of these people met. That's where these minds came together, and that's where the initiatives basically started from. And that was sort of, if I did have a wish, not an agenda, but a wish, it was to sort of bring people together like that and for them to step into their power and do stuff like that. So that was the true joy. And seeing a big sort of smiley face on the Union Jack at the rallies and stuff, and people really taking ownership and and the smiley face too. I just loved seeing the smiley face everywhere. It was such a depowering sort of unattackable sort of branding logo thing that it sort of made you smile. And so yeah, there was lots of really joyful moments, and lots of lots of people did have stepped into their power. I did in it. A lot of other people did too, and that's all that's all we can wish for anyone as individuals, let alone stay in the park. So it was great to watch, and so many Stan babies and Stan marriages and Stan. There's a whole story there, a brilliant one.
Oh, beautiful. I mean, I think the magic of a stand in the park really wasn't just the defiance; it was communion. You know, for a lot of people, it gave them something deeper. It was a lifeline of human connection at a time where people had enforced disconnection. You know, social isolation, social distancing, lockdowns, all these different things. And for many, the stands were a place where it was the only place where you could go without being judged or masked or isolated. Did you realize at the time what a lifeline this would be? I mean, you've already talked about some of the stories you've received, and it really was. But could you even imagine that would be the case?
No, I don't think so. No, I hadn't quite got. I didn't have the luxury of getting that far ahead of myself to even sort of look past me standing in the park when I was starting it. And then it grew so quickly that it sort of was still just unfolding as every day. I was just trying to keep up with how quickly it grew. And so, no, not at all. Not at all.
Was it you for yourself? Were you looking for connection and communion in such a way, or was it just simply a symbolic act for you initially?
I think subconsciously I was, and it was ramping up about the time that Stand in the Park sort of was ramping up was when it was really ramping up too. So it really stepped into its own after it started in that sense. But I really needed it. It was the light. It was the absolute lifeline for us all, and that physical energy exchange is important as food. And it was even more important than ever at that stage to just go and just have a truly physical energy exchange with people who are on the frequency of freedom, in a time where people were so lonely and so scared and so rejected and so attacked. It was so important to have just people that knew what we were talking about in the physical, not online, but in the physical. And going forwards, those people weren't just in the park. We swapped numbers, and we were having drinks on Friday and meeting up on Wednesday, and it was a far bigger relationship than an hour in the park. Wow. I didn't see it coming at all. No.
Amazing. And then a lot of people have, as we touched upon, kind of have wanted it to become something bigger or different. And even now, when we look back, you know, our freedoms were so heavily eroded, but now there are different issues in the world that you've touched upon. But some of the bigger issues, some of the bigger principled issues, like there's an erosion of the peace movement. You know, where is the peace movement in the world right now in the face of global political, conflicts and wars? And you know, the climate story is completely hijacked a movement that previously cared about nature and the environment. So, you know, people are now looking for a new home to go and stand for peace or to stand for nature. You know, is Stand in a Park a place for that to develop, do you think?
Absolutely. And I think I think a Stand in the Park has only just started, fortunately / unfortunately, in this world of sort of bipartisan or whatever the word is of dissected or division, where they stand for that and they stand for that, and it's almost like the Monty Python movie at the moment, where we're the Judean people's front and we're the people's front of Judea. People are so close to each other yet fully attacking each other, and that just can't happen at a Stand in the Park. It was never born. It was never born like that, and it can't be by nature of how it's organically grown or what it still stands for. And so I think slowly but surely people will figure that out and filter back down there. And I always called it the diesel engine of protests. As Stand in the Park will just chug along and chug along and chug along. It will never increase revs. It will never decrease revs. It will never go anywhere. It will just be sitting there fueling up people who want to go down there. And so I think it will be discovered by people who've never even heard of it and really embraced. And it is. I mean, 50 or 60 have started in the USA over the last sort of 2 months. They're still starting in Romania, Thailand. There's heaps in Canada. It's still really quite sort of chugging along quite nicely. It's just in the background a little bit more because of we're not sort of faced with those mandates and lockdowns quite like we were. But she's chugging. She chugs.
But you kind of answered my next question, which is, what would it take to kind of bring a summer revival across, the world right now? And that's me placing my own kind of desire and intent on it, as opposed to allowing it just to chug along as it's intended to be. Where do you sit on?
In answer to that, I think Stand in the Park will be recognised on a global scale. I don't know whether it will be a sort of a movie star or something will mention it, or somehow it will get mega coverage at some stage and people will really see the vision, and then it will go from sort of from what we can tell, and because it's not an organisation, it's a collective, and I've never led it. I'm really completely out of control of the whole thing, as much as I paid to run it and everything. So from what I can tell, there's about 1,100 in about 30 countries now. And then and I think it'll do what it did in the very beginning and go from 1,100 to 11,000 very quickly, from some sort of coverage or some sort of something, is what I think. But who cares? Who cares? It will do its own thing.
Amazing. Tell us about the book that you wrote. You've written a book that chronicles this chapter of your life. What inspired you to take to the written page on this one?
I set out to write a book about a stand in the park, because there's just so many cool stories and so many cool people involved, and it's so broad and so deep and so touching that I thought that maybe we'd get the stories from all of those people that create a book of sort of almost like chicken soup for the soul of sort of stand in the park stories. But really didn't, as soon as I set out to write that, it really didn't come together like that at all very early in the piece. We weren't really getting the interaction from the people that I needed to fill a whole book up. The stories, it just didn't kind of work, but what was working in that was my story of it. And what was happening, and because I was arrested in July 2021 for basically running a stand in the park, and I was organising all of the bigger protests in Sydney at that stage. So I'd organised, I think, 6 or 7 of those large Sydney protests, and one was in a lockdown allegedly, and so less than a week later than that, I was in jail and kicked out of Sydney. I was given 24 hours to leave Sydney. A violent offender wouldn't have got the bail conditions that I had. It was really sort of quite out of control. So there was my story in that as well. And then as soon as we started looking into the factual side of it as well, it really just came together. It's sort of my life story, and then the beginning of a stand in the park and the running of those protests, and then what I was saying at the time. So there's a lot of sort of stuff that's based on my videos from there, and the factual sort of commentary that was put in there is very sobering. So it's almost a history book. I look back on that the other day, and looked at it and thought, this book will come into its own in 20 years. You look back on some of that stuff, it's more nuts now than it was at the time. I mean, it was so insane what the politicians were saying, and those lockdowns and restrictions, and we got 10 minutes to get home, and then you're locked down for 2 weeks. And so it's a really interesting sort of book of my personal experience of it, the beginning of the stand in the park, what was happening at the time, and the factual side of it. So it's an interesting book. It's a great book.
Yeah, we'll put the links in the description. So wherever you're watching or listening to this, do look out for the links to the description to the book and Brady's other work. You went to jail. Was that the biggest challenge you faced on this journey, or tell us about some of the challenges you've had to face?
I think that was the biggest. It was quite confronting being treated like that by the police. I mean, we were all confronted by just how baseless this was. We were so right all the time, and we were being so pillared and attacked and laughed at and ridiculed. It was almost sort of the indignation of the righteousness of how can this even be 1 millimeter into any type of existence, let alone so far into it with so many people on board. So it was a very foreign feeling. It's been so right when everyone else had gone so nuts. And so we were already struggling with that. But take that to the next level, when the law started getting involved, and a lot of people can relate to this. And mine was slightly different in that I was arrested for organising the protests and for doing these videos and for a stand in the park. But to be caught in the system like that, in the face of such righteousness, when you're being so brave and so and standing in such truth, and to be arrested for it and put in jail for it, and to be spoken to like that for the police, and then dragged through the courts, and it cost me 20 grand to fight it. I was kicked out of Sydney. I had 24 hours to leave Sydney, so I had to leave a whole house full of furniture there. They escorted me out of Sydney. I had to report every day. I was all through every paper in Australia, so it was in all the big papers, but all the local papers as well. So I was public enemy number one. I was getting death threats every day. It was just nuts. It was just absolutely nuts. And so that definitely was the hardest part. But I'd do it all again.
Wow. I mean, what was going through your head when all that was happening? It's bonkers to see that and to be basically kicked out of your town. I mean, it feels almost like something from a Cowboys and Indians film. It's like chasing the villain out of town. It's or the quote unquote villain, according to the gut, the legal system. It's wild. It's totally wild. I mean, how did you feel about all that?
Well, and I was a political prisoner. I mean, they dropped pretty much every one of those charges. And so I was just a political prisoner. I was causing them too many problems. They wanted me out, and so they got me out. And the police are judge, jury, and executioner on the bail conditions. So that's why I was kicked out. I was going to leave Sydney anyway, but that was the bail conditions. And they've done that to a lot of people here in Australia is you're not getting out of jail for 6 months unless you sign the bail conditions, and one of them was leave Sydney within 24 hours. And so it was pretty scary. I mean, I didn't know, I was in jail. I didn't know when I'd get out. I didn't know how far they were going to take this. I mean, it was such unknown territory in every way, shape and form. But to be sort of locked up in it and at the whim, caught in that legal system where you're just so powerless, you really are just at the whim of it, that you've got no power whatsoever, and you're literally locked in a cage. And so it was pretty confronting, and I think it's taken a little while to sort of unpack. I wouldn't say that I've sort of got PTSD or anything from it. I think I'm able to process as I'm going enough and move energy enough to not let that old pain, let that new pain turn into old pain. But I had to unpack it, and it was a big upheaval. I went from sort of Sydney and knowing that to living on a farm 5 hours north of Sydney, sort of spending a lot of time alone. And so when you add all these things together, it was a whole new person to find. But I like this new guy. I like what happened. I'd do it all again. I found parts of myself that I liked the most in this. It really crystallized me, my courage, my spirituality, brought us all together. So so much more good has come from all of this than bad. No matter what happened to anyone, so much more. It was a brilliant thing.
Wow. Well, tell us a little more about that. How has this developed you as a person? Life as a freedom activist or an activist for freedom and truth. How has your life changed as a result of the actions that you've taken?
Well, physically, I mean, I was sort of in business at that time, and so I was chasing my tail in business and probably looking for the agenda in that of sort of trying to be the big man and get the money, and probably wanted the hot wife with the blonde hair and the boat and the place on the water. And I was sort of not quite as poisonous as that, but probably still in that sort of vein of city boy and businessman. And so that was sort of inadvertently turned on its head, and I had no choice. And I was lucky enough to have been in the crypto. And so at the same time as I was arrested, the crypto had gone nuts. And so I was lucky enough to have sort of been able to financially support myself in that, which changed a lot. And so I have to give credit to that. But I think it's just crystallized who we are, parts of ourselves that we didn't know existed. I mean, I've stood next to little old ladies who have got the biggest backbone and the biggest middle finger out of anyone I've ever met. And they found that in themselves. I found that in them. A lot of my old friends just completely chucked me in the bin, unfriended me on Facebook. Best mates gone, lifelong friendships over, and a lot of us have got those stories. And so we crystallized who we are, who other people are, how they're important to us, what's important to us. It's driven us, a lot of us, back to nature. It's driven us a lot back to what's really important in those friendships and communication, and steered a lot of people away from mainstream medicine and back to spirituality. And so in every way, shape and form, this has been brilliant.
Have you ever felt burnt out or disillusioned during this time?
No, I got plenty more in me.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, the way I see you is you are symbolic of the smiley face on the t-shirts. It always brings such joy to the situation. What helps you stay centered? What through this transformation, what enables you to stay in that state?
My other book that I've written 3 books, but my other book, which is the first book that I wrote in 2012, is called The Art of Shush. And it's what I described before is how I came up with a sort of practical technique about how to quieten the mind. And because I went through a major depression at the end of it, but it was really not a happy life for me up until that point. That just crescendoed into a big depression. And I just finally turned around and just sort of faced that depression rather than being chased by that bear. And, started realizing that it was all it was in my head. And so I would just sort of drone on and on in the middle of the night, and I couldn't get back to sleep of just this speculation of what could have happened and what should happen, and expectation of what I deserve and what they shouldn't have done. And then this judgment of everybody and this self-annihilation and this points of reference and just giving meaning to everything. And I realized that I could sort of shush my mind and shut down those neural pathways and learn how to not think so much. And then when I started doing that, when I stopped putting the labels on the old pain, rather than calling my loneliness loneliness, I just called it nothing and let the feeling be in my body, and then I could process it. And then once all of those sort of old feelings were gone and I wasn't thinking so much, then I was literally just floating around in my intuition. And so that's where I live. I live there, and that's what started to stand in the park. That's what sort of led me to the crypto and let me stay in that and helped me sort of finance that. And so when you live in that life of no expectation and no agenda, and not scared of dying and whatever, then you're sort of totally in the moment. And I also think that we're winning this. It looks very scary out there, but they are losing this on every front. They were already losing it. It looks like we're under attack right now, but this is a bunch of old men defending what they're about to lose. They've already lost control of the financial system. They've already lost control of the media. They've lost control of spirituality, whereas the church used to say everything. They've lost control of the law. They've lost control of us. They've lost control of everything. We're winning absolutely on this. Will they burn the world down to rule the ashes is the question. And yes, they're causing major carnage. But when you look at the temper of the times, not everybody's awake, but setting aside those absolute morons, how many people are switched on to what's going on? How many people are united? How many people are just totally seeing through this climate stuff? You have to lead people, you have to be a leader. You have to have buy-in. Hitler had buy-in. Mao had buy-in. People were following them. Everybody freaking hates these guys. They're not leading anybody. They're scratching their heads, and the only thing they've got is a misinformation and a disinformation bill, and trying to flood with sort of excess immigration and some of this really gnarly stuff. I mean, I'm not, my blinkers aren't on, but that's the best they've got. Let's try and stop people talking. Not let's lead people. Let's come up with some good policies. Let's change what we're doing. That's all they've got. And they think they can stop people talking in this day and age of the internet. It's crazy. You can't put your thumb on this many people's heads. You can't play whack-a-mole. You know that computer game where you've got the bowls? You can't play whack-a-mole with this many people. It's over for them. And so I know that. And so I live there too.
Wow. I mean, that's quite an incredible transformation to come to that point. I think people are going to have to read the book to see exactly how you got there. I mean, in a few moments, you went from X to A to B. I mean, there must have been some points of resistance along the way and lessons and insights. What was the kind of biggest transformative practice or experience that you discovered that helped you get to that place?
Oh, and look, I'm pretty sure that's the hardest thing anybody can ever do, to completely redesign your entire head and find yourself as energy and live there is probably, I believe we've sort of come down to have this experience in the world in this finite world to rediscover ourselves as infinite. And that's kind of what it is letting go of your old pain and seeing through the illusion of a lot of this and finding yourself as intuition, as an infinite being. And so, it's very, 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 very confronting process, extremely difficult, went on for many, many, many years. I cried every night for about 3 years, bawling my eyes out, just laying on the lounge room floor, just absolutely pissing myself crying, moving the old energy. I wasn't crying because of what happened when I was a kid or anything like that. I'd trigger it with that, but then I'd get that out of the way because it was the thoughts that was perpetuating it. And so I just cried and cried and cried and cried and cried. I saw through the money illusion, and so I went bankrupt multiple times. A lot of people sort of ditched me, and I'd still been very lonely at that stage. I hadn't had a relationship for many years, and so When you start biting that stuff off, it starts really testing you even more heavily, and that went on for a very long time. And so it was a really, really difficult process. And the only thing that I think I said it in the book is that that process from when I started sort of the spiritual shift for probably 3 or 4 years was like falling backwards off a cliff naked into cloud, just not knowing where the landing was and not having anything to hold on to at all. Just literally that feeling in your stomach, like that, just of falling and not knowing where the landing is, because I'd stopped thinking. And so all of the points of reference and all of the identity and all of the stuff that I knew was gone. And so I literally didn't have any points of reference into cloud for years. And I was just still there. I still live there. It's all those old points of reference that were holding me back. And it's all these new points of reference that are getting in your way. So I'm still floating there, but it's a whole new way of being.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, it feels in a way we live in a culture where everyone is stuck in the mind, and therefore that in a way becomes a barrier to transcending it. Do you feel that there's societal parallels to your own inner journey with what you've just shared?
Absolutely. And societal parallels to what's just happened in the world. I mean, these sick people that have done this over the last 5 years could have only done this to very sick people. And when people aren't sick, and a lot of the sickness is in people's heads, if we could rediscover ourselves as infinite, then we would step into our power. And so when we do, sick people, we won't be sick anymore. Sick people won't even exist. They'll literally just dissolve into insignificance, which is what's happening now. Sick people could only do this to sick people. When we aren't sick anymore, they don't even exist. And so the project here is us. We look like we've got to fight these people and take it down from the top, and there's a big battle taking place. We're better off going on and finding ourselves spiritually and dealing with our own stuff. The project here is us. Project here is fixing us, not fixing the world. When we do, the world's fixed. The action takes itself, and the world is a reflection.
Yeah, I heard someone say the other day that life is a single player game, and it took me a little while to get my head wrestling around that because of the interdependencies with each other. But we can only experience life through our own filters and our own experiences and our own actions, and therefore, what the other characters in the game actually end up doing has nothing to do with us, but the actions that we take as the main character in the game that we individually play is what we can influence, and it kind of.
Yeah,
I see up parallel to what you're describing.
Absolutely, and it's contagious. And the people who have taken 100% personal responsibility in the last 5 years, it didn't work on us. The propaganda didn't work on us. We're not vaxxed. We're not angry. We're not fighting. We're not compromised. And so imagine if everybody was like that, then we'd be in Parliament. We'd be making the correct decisions for our kids. And so it's a piece by piece sort of thing, and it starts with us. And we can't wait for someone either. We can't wait for 1 million people to come along with so that we can be the million and first. We have to be in this leadership role. We have to be in 100% personal responsibility role. As healthy, full-bodied, emotionally rounded, spiritual beings connected to the ground and communicative, and then the world reflects that.
Powerful. So where is this path leading you now, Brady? Where is the flow taking you at the moment?
No idea. No clue. I've written another book, and so that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Well, it's yet to be published.
Yeah. Once you start shushing, you do have to move the old energy out, and so it's covered in the art of shush, but it's an extension of that. It's just sort of the art of moving energy, I guess. So there's a lot of quantum physics in there, because quantum physics proves that you're just Dan in a Dan suit. We're just light. The chair that we're sitting on, the table in front of us isn't there. What's behind us isn't there until we look around, and then it's there when we literally are manifesting moment by moment scientifically. It's all proven. And I love that you can sort of change the title on Quantum Physics 101 to Spirituality 101 and change none of the book at all, and they would say exactly the same thing. And so we are energy, and so how to identify ourselves as energy, and how to identify energy that we don't want in our own body as old energy, and how to bring in new energy, and how to be the bouncer at our own door of other people's energy, world energy, how to let stuff in, how to get stuff out. And so it's really important practice. We have to learn, we have to know that we're energy. We have to learn how to trade in the currency of energy rather than all those words that you described. It's just the way the world is. It's so in our heads right now that intuition's gone and that's so easily polluted. And we really have to get out of our heads and start trading in that sort of intuition between each other and between ourselves, and trading in the currency of energy. And so, yes, it's a great book. I love the spirituality stuff, and I love the freedom stuff as well. I guess the challenge with the freedom stuff is staying out of the battle of it. Is kind of to really bring people to the answers and lead people back to themselves, because that's what a true leader does, is lead people back to themselves. We're not the fire. We can only throw sparks. We have to do this together. And I think the challenge is, once you sort of start wading into this freedom stuff, you do get into a battle. You want to go into politics. You're sort of going to play the politics game. If you really want to stand for something, so the stand in the park doesn't do it. But you see a lot of these freedom sort of people and groups really battling each other because egos get involved. And so I need to tread the wire. I don't want to get involved in that. It doesn't serve me or anyone else, and I don't enjoy it. And so treading the wire of sort of the freedom stuff and the spirituality stuff, and how to interweave Brady Gunn and the stand in the park and the freedom stuff and the spirituality stuff, and lead people that probably wouldn't have listened to any of the stuff that I've just talked about otherwise, how to sort of get them to that point in the freedom stuff to be able to operate and take that responsibility is the challenge for me, and a good one. But I don't know what that looks like.
It's a challenge for all of us, I think, Brady. Even for myself, even though I resonate and feel what you're saying and connect deeply with it, being in the battle is part of the problem itself, and that is, in a way, it's part of the illusion. And the more you spend in the battle, the more you are away from your own personal path. And I think that's a challenge that I've faced as an individual. And it's taken me away from some of the things, and it does eventually become a distraction. We can get caught up in every worldly drama or moral outrage or flavor of the month issue. And let's face it, they used to say, like in the fashion industry, they would change the fashion by season, and then they condensed it to monthly, then weekly, then daily, and then basically hourly. We've got the same with the news cycle. What's in vogue yesterday is not in vogue today. And it just, the social media algorithms and the newspapers have realized if they can keep people in a permanent state of outrage, and they can keep your eyeballs, and if it enrages, it engages, and therefore, it triggers us, it gives us that fight or flight into action potentially, or at least into outrage. Actually, after enough times you're being stuck in outrage, you actually absorb so much that you no longer act. And you think that commenting online is a form of action.
Yeah.
We get caught in that trap. I get caught in that trap. And it takes us away from ourselves, and it becomes a distraction. And it becomes everything that Matthias Desmond talks about, really, in terms of the meaning crisis. Because when we talk about mass formation, it's not just for other people. If we're caught in free-floating anxiety and we're caught in loss of meaning, then we're in the same trap. So
yeah,
breaking free really is kind of back to ourselves.
Well, absolutely, and I think we do need to block out a lot. Not wade into that. We're all on our screens. We're all guilty of being on our screens way too much, and I think we do need to consciously sort of stay out of that. And it's very easy to think that you're taking action, like you said, by posting online, and that's doing enough where it's not. And I think it's very easy to get so overwhelmed by everything. And a lot of people would say quite openly, "Well, I need to know what's going on." I'm like, no, you don't. You really don't. And a lot of people are just overwhelming themselves with all of this information and doing nothing. They think that knowing what's going on is something, and sharing it. I'm going to share the shit out of this. It's like, no, that doesn't do anything. You're better off not knowing anything and doing one thing, and doing one thing and taking action with your body and moving it and making movement there. And then being happy. The best thing that we could do right now is work on ourselves and be the best human being we can be, and that's contagious. Smile at everyone in the shops, be a really good dad, learn what's important in life to show your kids that even though you lost your job, that we could still be happy, whatever. Just focus on being the best people that we can be, and tune out of all of this stuff, because that is all they've got. All they've got is outrage and whipping us up into a frenzy. It's so foundationless, because that's all they've got. We do need to stay out of it. very challenging. And it's also worth bearing in mind too that this is no one's responsibility. Some people are taking this really heavily, this burden of responsibility of we've got to fix this world. It's not up to you. It's not up to me. It's not up to anyone. We're doing it together. Just do the best you can, but preserve yourself as best. Everyone needs to do the best they can, but preserve ourselves the best we can, rather than taking on this big, heavy responsibility of the world's completely gone and it's up to us to fix it. And what are we going to do? It's far too much of a burden, far too much weight, and not helpful. The people will come when they're ready. The people will come when they're ready. The best thing, and this out of control freight train is crashing. They will be ready. They're jumping off as we speak. The best thing that we can do on this freedom side of the fence is stand on the side of that freight train with open arms, with grace. It doesn't matter what they said to me. I don't care if you've sent me death threats or whatever. As long as you come cap in hand, then you're totally welcome on this freedom side of the fence. We've never attacked anyone when you think about it. On this freedom side of the fence, we've only ever defended. You go get vaxxed or do whatever the hell you want. I'm just fighting for my freedom and your freedom to do what you want. We've only ever defended. None of us have ever attacked anyone, and we won't going forwards. And that's the grace that we will continue to stand in. And that's the benchmark.
Wow, Brady, powerful way to finish. I mean, it's a difficult wire to walk, as you say, that line, but it's an important one to keep focused on. As we close out, if someone who's watching or listening to this is thinking, I want to do that, I want to step up and go and stand in a park or even start a movement of their own, what would you say to them?
Just do it.
Yes. Yeah. The formula is simple: pick a park and go.
That's my modus operandi in life. Always has been. I've just done stuff. It's just a lot of people think about stuff. I think about it and then do it, and that's all you got to do. That's all you got to do. But you got to do something. People have to move their bodies right now. You don't get this for free. Got to do something, even if it's standing in a park.
What advice would you give people who overcome the fear? You know, some say it takes great courage even to stand in solitary in the park, in solitude in the park. Yeah, what would you say to someone who's feeling the pull, but also simultaneously feeling the fear?
Again, just don't think. Just do. Just there's sometimes in life you've got to go to bed and pull your head over the covers and have a good cry. There's other times in your life when you have to physically pick yourself up by your own collar and chuck yourself out your front door. You need to fight yourself when it comes time. You need to fight the feeling of wanting to go under the covers and put your head under it and pick yourself up by your own collar and chuck yourself out the front door. Now's the time to be brave. So do it. Be brave. The rewards are there. Nothing's ever as scary as it looks, and the rewards are there. Feels good.
Everything's on the other side of that decision. Last question for you, Brady. If this interview were archived for 100 years, what would be the one message you would want future generations to hear?
That we did the best we can. We're doing the best we can.
Beautiful. Brady, it's been so wonderful to reconnect with you, and such admiration for what you began, and even more admiration for who you've become during this process, and hearing your story of transformation and the practices that you've developed in order to become the man you are today. So it's a great honor to have stood alongside you in different parts of the world over the last 5 years and continue to do so. And as much as we say that we got to unplug, I will still say, please do share the shit out of this one, as you said. This has been a wonderful conversation, and may the stands long continue. And thank you so much for the great energy you pour into the world.
And right back at you, mate. I feel like I should be interviewing you. You're a great man. We really appreciate you a lot.
Thank you, Brady.